Hi everybody. I want to spend just a couple minutes talking about this idea of revision. At this point in the term, we're going to be revisiting the work that we've done and start editing it into official drafts, developing our thesis, even doing a reverse outline, which is really cool. But we're starting to explore what revision is, and I want to talk about some tips and suggestions to help us with that. Revision essentially means re-seeing our work. We worked on our writing plan, and then we spent a week exploring writing styles and not really actively working on our writing plan anymore. And now we're kind of going through the process of revising, revisioning, re-seeing the answers to those writing questions, the prompts that we did in our last assignment. And we're talking about it now because as we move forward for the rest of the term, we're going to keep doing sort of revisions, making our writing plan into an outline, into a paper, that kind of stuff. So we really want to understand what we mean by revision. Essentially what we do with revision is we want to reread our own work and look at it with a critical eye, ask questions, think about what it is that we're trying to say and whether or not we ourselves are being effective doing so. There are two different levels of revision. There's large scale and small scale. Large scale is where we look at the organization. Do we have a solid introduction, a good conclusion? Does the paper flow from one paragraph to the next, and does it support all of our main ideas? Once we develop a thesis, that's going to be part of our large scale revision. Does all of our work, all of our paragraphs support that thesis? Now, small scale revision would be smaller, looking at sentence structure, looking at word choice, making sure our periods are in the right place, as well as making sure that our citations are in the correct place too. So there's a couple of different ways to approach revision. The big step first is take some time away from your writing. It's very hard to revise something when you've just finished it, because you've just done all this work to make it good for this assignment, and now you want to go back and make it better. It can lead to frustration if we do it right away. So always take at least a day or two, step away from your work, and then approach it with fresh eyes. That's the incubation period that we were talking about the other week. Excuse me. Now, revision does take some time and dedication. You are taking your work, which is already great, and making sure that it's effective in doing what you want to do to support your thesis. So be willing to spend time on revision. Okay, take that time, incubate a little bit, and then set time aside so that you actually have quality time to spend. Revisions aren't going to be done during the commercial breaks of the Lions football game, for instance. We want to have dedicated space and time to make sure that we are focusing on our writing. Once you set the time aside, one of the great revision strategies that I strongly encourage students to use is reading your draft out loud. And I know it sounds silly to be sitting in an empty room reading out loud to yourself, but reading out loud really allows us to catch those sentence level errors that we may have made in one of our original drafts. It's going to let us know if we have our periods in the wrong place, because as we're saying it out loud, it sounds off. It's going to help us catch and engage with each one of those words and see if that's the right word choice or not. Often when we see our writing, our eyes tell us that we're seeing what we want to see. By actually engaging with each word, reading it out loud, we're able to kind of circumvent our natural tendency to see what we want to see. So I do strongly encourage you guys to read them out loud, and if you're uncomfortable doing that, see if you have a friend or a family member who could read it out loud for you, and that really helps because you can have a conversation about how you can make your paper even better. Another tips and suggestion that I encourage you guys to do as you're reading is sort of do a critical analysis on your own work. Did anything in your own writing surprise you? Have you learned anything new since you wrote this that maybe you could work to incorporate? And what specifically do you need to do to make this the best paper that you can? Other questions that we can ask is, what is the main purpose of this essay that we're writing, and do we support that purpose, that goal, that claim that we have? Are we actually using our evidence clearly to support our thesis? And if there are any remaining questions, are you answering them? Are you providing evidence to support your point, and are you being clear about it? Another question that we want to ask when we're doing our revision is, how does it sound? And I know this kind of sounds like a silly question too, but how does the writing sound? Do you sound professional? Are you using any slang, or maybe you're using a lot of contractions? Do you sound like an academic? Is your paper academic? Do you use that evidence fully to support what you're saying? And do you sound like you know what you're talking about? If not, maybe let's go back and get rid of some of those contractions, make sure that we're not using any slang, make sure that we're using good solid word choices to support our academic voice. And this is one of the things that I can really help you with if you want. Remember, you can always send me your paper before it's due, and I can review it and make sure that you're sounding the way that you want to sound. Okay. Are you using, another good question to ask, are you using too big of words? That might sound contradictory to me just asking if we're writing academically, but academically speaking doesn't always mean using the biggest word in the dictionary. Are you being concise and supportive and clear is more important than using the $5 words that we might find in the thesaurus. Okay, and then we also want to make sure as we're revising that we're not assuming anything with our audience. This happens often in this class, not you guys specifically, but in early English writing classes, that we assume that our audience knows what we're talking about. And a good example that pertains to this class specifically is not mentioning who the author or the essay is that you're reviewing. By just saying, yes, this author did great, your audience doesn't know which author you're talking about or what they did great with. So always make sure that you include the author and the title of the essay that you're working with. Okay? Make sure that you're not assuming anything that your readers may or may not know. Be clear. Don't patronize and don't talk down, but make sure you're providing enough details that your audience can understand what you're saying. All right? We also want to be aware of our paragraph length. Okay? For this class, we are required to write 5 to 8 sentences per paragraph. Some of us are writing 2 sentences per paragraph, and while in creative writing that's totally okay, in academic writing it isn't enough. Okay, so we want to make sure that we are writing 5 to 8 sentences for each paragraph. And I know sometimes it can be a challenge to know how to add enough detail, especially when the prompt is relatively simple. So if you're having any concerns with that, that's something that we can talk about in the general discussions questions forum. Let's brainstorm. Let's talk about how you can get good solid 5 to 8 sentences per paragraph. Okay? So those are some ideas and tips on how to approach the revision process with this specific paper that we're working on. If you have any questions, you know how to reach me.